Welcome to Fantasy Football Today Dynasty. I am your host, Heath Cummings, and it is time for the rookie wide receiver preview, part 2. We've got wide receiver 7 through 12 in the consensus rankings today, and we've got Derek Brown from Fantasy Pros here to break it all down with us.
Heath, how you doing, man? It's a good Friday to be here. We're right up at the precipice of the NFL draft. It's peeking over the horizon. The silhouette is becoming more formed. So it's not just it's maybe somewhere off in the distance. It's actually here, dude. We're one day closer every single day. I love it.
What all have you guys been doing in terms of draft prep content, and where can people find it?
Oh, I've been diving into the weeds, getting deeper and deeper into this class. Everything, of course, is at fantasypros.com right now. We've had a ton of mock drafts drop on the YouTube space. Seth Wilcock and I are rocking it every single week for the NFL draft show for Fantasy Pros. I've got all my positional primers, and what my labor of love that will be live Wednesday before the draft is my top 100 skill players. So quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight ends will all be written up and live on the site.
Awesome stuff, guys. Go check that out. On today's show, we will talk about Jayden, Higgins, Jalen, Noel, Elic, Ayomanor. I may have got that right, or Derek may correct me later. Jalen Royals, Jack Bech, and Xavier Restrepo. We need to mention one name that we're not going to talk about on today's show, and that is Isaiah Bond. He wasn't on the 1 through 6 show. He's not going to be on the 7 through 12 show. He is facing sexual assault allegations. He has countersued and claims none of those are true. We're just going to have to see how the legal process plays out and how NFL teams react to this news. But again, not something we're going to talk about on this show. We will talk about those other 6 wide receivers, but we always start with 3 questions for our guest. And Derek, I like to ask this of people that are coming on to talk about rookies. What is the most important thing to you when it comes to rookie wide receiver evaluation?
There's so much to dive through as far as with wide receivers and what we can deem important. I think my biggest thing is I could tell you analytics, I could tell you the film. I mean, my biggest thing is just trying to marry the two.
Right.
And I know that's not picking out just one thing, but really in my process, it's trying to bring those two together and paint the most complete picture of a player's skill sets and what they can do and the areas that they have to improve, and using data and the film to do so.
Excellent. I think that's the best way to do it. Like, if you're leaning too much on one or the other, you're going to miss some things. You've got to have the entire picture. Now, I talked about the wide receiver 7 through 12 that we were going to talk about, but like we did with Matt Waldman and the running backs, I want to give Derek a chance to talk about a couple of his guys. And so I asked him, who are your favorite wide receivers that are not ranked 1 through 12? I've got a couple here. So question number 2, what's your elevator pitch for Elijhah Badger?
Well, maybe I'll start off with this with spit and fire here. Elijhah Badger is actually inside my top 12, so I have him at wide receiver 10. Very, very enamored with his skill set. I don't think he's getting talked about near enough in the process. And for a player that we have seen over multiple collegiate seasons operate extremely well in very different roles. If you look at Arizona State 2022 to 2023, this is a guy that just ate up defenses in the underneath. Basically, it was put the ball in his hands and let him just go absolutely just bully people. He was 3rd and 7th in those years in missed tackles forced, 13th in 2023 in yak per reception. So proof of concept as an underneath threat, just get the ball in his hands and the guy could possibly debo some people. And then for final season, he goes to Florida and they said, well, you're really, really good at that. But instead, we're going to use you in a totally different role. And he becomes their field stretcher, and he was the downfield threat. ADOT bumped up, was the 8th highest amongst FBS wide receivers, least 50 targets. And he crushed in that role as well, Heath. I mean, he was 14th in yards per route run, top 15 in basically everything you look at as far as efficiency versus man coverage. And it all points back to his film too, like good route runner, strong at the catch point, very strong throughout his routes. Like, you're not pushing him off his routes. And I think if the medicals check out for Elijhah Badger, and he did have a pretty significant back injury. Now, again, diving through college injury reporting is always its own adventure in itself.
Right.
But the back injury in 2023, if the medicals come through, I think we're going to hear Badger's name called. He's going to be one of those guys that on late day 2, early day 3, gets his name called, and everybody's like, looking up on their favorite site and saying, this guy's like supposedly going to be outside the top 200 players. Like, why is his name called? But he's very talented.
Excellent stuff. Put him down in your consideration for maybe round 3 of your rookie drafts, and everybody's going to be like, why did you use your 3rd round pick on him? And then they're going to find out. What is your elevator pitch for Tory Horton?
Very talented, physical ex wide receiver type. Smaller school prospect, but numerous years. And unfortunately, his final collegiate season was only 6 games because it was limited due to a knee injury, but popped in the efficiency metrics, 3.4 yards per route run. Previous years, he's checking a lot of boxes, whether it's 2023, 16th in missed tackles forced, 2022, he's 22nd in yards per route run. And this is a large sample size against all FBS and FCS wide receivers, at least 50 targets. So pretty large sample there, and Tory Horton just jumps off the page, but big galloping X wide receiver, good through contact, strong at the catch point. Like, the guy that I kept going back to, and this is probably the high end of his range of outcomes, because probably draft capital is going to be 3rd, maybe 4th round for him, depending. But as a guy that I think if you put him on the perimeter, ask him to win, ask him to stretch the field sometimes, he reminded me a lot of like a Michael Gallup, Marvin Jones, where I won't be surprised. Like, I'm not projecting this as a player in future seasons we're going to get 1,200 receiving yards, 10+ touchdowns. But if he walks away with a few seasons of 900+, 7 to 8 scores, it's going to be good enough for us in fantasy.
Awesome stuff. Let's take a short break, and then we will jump into wide receiver 7 through 12 in the consensus rookie wide receiver rankings.
They want to take this place from us. My family is in danger. My wife is lost to me, and I don't have time.
1923, new season now streaming exclusively on Paramount Plus.
Man, if you're watching on YouTube and you've not watched all of 1923 yet, get that done. That's a fantastic series. I love basically everything in that universe, and 1944 cannot get here soon enough. But what's here right now is wide receiver 7 through 12 in the consensus rankings. We're going to start with Jayden Higgins out of Iowa State. And the way we'll run through this, Derek, is I'm going to give you the open floor, give your eval on the player, and particularly whether you're higher or lower than what the ranking says at wide receiver 7. And then I got a couple questions for you as well.
Oh, absolutely, Heath. Let's dive into it, man. I mean, Jayden Higgins, let's just kick this off. He's wide receiver 7 in the consensus. He's my wide receiver 5 in my rankings. I have him over some notable names of Matthew Golden being one of those guys. And this just comes down to, I have I wouldn't be surprised if he snuck into the 1st round of the NFL draft. I think he's probably more appropriately going in the 2nd round, and I have a high 2nd round grade on him. And a guy that I don't think we've seen yet the full potential of his game. I mean, is he an X wide receiver? Yes. Is he physical, and can he get open on in-breaking, out-breaking routes? I mean, my comp for him, my working comp for him is, I think he's developmental Michael Thomas. Like, I want to see him go to Denver, because if you can use this guy, and it's not to say that he cannot win from the boundary, so I don't want people to get it twisted with how I'm framing his skill set, but you put him into a power slot role, you put him into a 50-50 outside and inside type of role, I think this guy is going to command a high-end target share from day one. Now, there are some drawbacks to his game. He checks a lot of boxes, both analytically and on the film. I mean, 27th and 16th in yards per route run. And this is while playing alongside. And we also have to get context with this with guys that, for all the LSU guys in the past, the Texas guys, but these Iowa State dudes, they're for real this year. And both of these guys are extremely talented. So playing alongside Jalen Noel last year definitely needs to get brought up in the context of his numbers. But for a player that, I think, again, you can put him out on the boundary. He does, and he went out and he tested fantastically at the combine, better than I even thought he was going to do. Like, film, I probably put like a 4.5 speed on him. Now he goes out, he jumps well, runs in the 4.4s. I think that if he would have gone, and I'll say this, Heath, if he would have gone to an SEC school, if he would have gone to a more high-profile school with his testing, with his metrics, I think this guy would be getting 1st-round buzz, and I think people would be putting more respect on his name as a player that really I really like and continue to pound the table for. And he's part of the narrative that I believe in, that I think this wide receiver class is better than people give it credit for.
So I think one interesting thing, you talk about that first round draft capital. We talk about the size at 6'4", 215, basically. I think a lot of people see that and think, man, he sounds kind of like Tet McMillan.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at the consensus rankings, and there's this wide gap between Tet and Higgins. Worth noting, I look at Matt Waldman's guide, and he's got them back to back. So I guess for you, what's the biggest thing that separates these two bigger wide receivers?
I think it's twofold for me. I think Tet has a very, very strong profile as far as what he can do after the catch. You see that, I mean, immediately it jumps off tape. If you compare the two players, just stick them side by side, we're talking about Higgins. He's not a giant yak threat. Like, right. I'm not saying that he can't produce it, but that's where the divide really comes in for him versus Tet, where Tet, collegiate career, 5.5 yards after the catch per reception. Higgins is down at 4.5. And it also shows up in his ability to force missed tackles. Like, over the last 2 years, Jayden Higgins only has 25 missed tackles forced, which is not a bad number, especially for an ex-receiver. Right. We can get into the quarterback play at Iowa State. But when you compare that to Tetairoa McMillan, like, again, going back to it, Jayden Higgins, 25 missed tackles forced over the last 2 years. Tetairoa McMillan forced more missed tackles in just 2024 alone than Jayden Higgins did over those final 2 seasons. And then it comes down to getting back to, again, like, if you put these guys on the perimeter, Tet has an incredibly impressive resume versus man and press, where he's just been battle tested in that X receiver role to be the alpha, to be on the outside. Like, over the last 2 years, Tet has accrued the 3rd and 10th most man coverage targets amongst all FBS wide receivers and produced top 10 yards per route run figures in both of those seasons, where Higgins has been a little bit more up and down. Like, he's shown that, can he do it well? Sure. Like, in this last season, he was 20th in yards per route run versus man coverage. But I think there's still something as far as in Higgins' game, as far as the release package and consistently playing to his size and his athleticism when pressed off the line, that he's got to improve. Whereas Tet, I think we've got more proof of concept than him winning in those ways.
So I know you said you've got him at wide receiver 5. He's wide receiver in the consensus range. Before we get to this range of wide receivers, how many running backs do you think should probably be off the board in a rookie draft?
I've got, let me see here. I've got 4 guys ahead of Jayden Higgins right now. I've got Ashton Jeanty, Caleb Johnson, Travion Henderson, and Amarion Hampton. It's that bucket of guys that we think are going to either go in the first round or go at the top of the second round. And Caleb's the one guy where maybe he falls back, maybe he goes in round 3, but I'm kind of projecting this tiny little swath of running backs that I have above Jayden Higgins as those are the guys that maybe get better draft capital or similar draft capital with really, really strong profiles to Jayden Higgins.
So I looking at a lot of the rookie mocks, I think you see Higgins early in round 2 a lot of times. And you see Tet at that 1.3, 1.4 range a lot of times. So I think a decision a lot of fantasy managers might be making, and draft capital could change the math on this, but they might be looking at, I need a running back and I need a wide receiver. So I can either go Tet with the 3-4 pick and then take RB 7 or 8 in this class early in round 2, or I can take Hampton or Henderson or whichever those guys you prefer, and then take Higgins early in round 2. Which of those combinations sounds better to you right now?
Right now, with what we're projecting, I would do the RB and then take Jayden Higgins, only because I feel better, and push back against if you feel different, Heath, but like, I feel better about Jayden Higgins' projected draft capital than, right now with the running backs, we're all wondering what that looks like. Like, we're projecting, like, I think the only 2 guys that we feel pretty freaking good about going in the first round, or at least in the top, say, 40 picks, are Amarion and Ashton Jeanty. And after those guys, it's like, what happens in the NFL draft is that second tier of D tackles, corners, offensive linemen, defensive edge guys. Is that going to push the running back position down where we don't get 2-3 guys going in the second round? Maybe we get only one, and the rest of them get pushed to day 3 or excuse me, round 3 and round 4 of the NFL draft. And I think that's going to be one of the determining factors of what shifts people's rankings is what happens in the second round, how many of those running backs go in the second round versus NFL teams saying, I mean, why do I got to draft a guy in the second round when I can pair 2 guys together in the 4th round and the 5th round and we complete our backfield that way? So I think the draft capital on the 3rd tier, or however people are dicing it up, but basically kind of RB 5 to 10, what does that look like as far as draft capital, and what does that do for the wide receivers?
I think that was all really well said. The only thing I would say is I think it seems like there's a pretty good consensus that both Genty and Hampton are worthy of a first-round grade. I'm really getting the feeling that we're getting the Bo Nix special from Sean Payton, and that Henderson, whether Hampton's there or not, is going to be a Denver Bronco. Just because he fits what Sean Payton wants out of his running backs so much. So I think it's possible we get 3 running backs in round 1. And then you're right. What happens after that gets really, really, how do people view Caleb Johnson versus Quinshon Judkins versus Scattaboo versus Devin Neal? Like, that's going to be really interesting. But that's enough on Jayden Higgins. We'll move to wide receiver 8. And honestly, it's kind of fun because it's his teammate. It's Jaylen Noel out of Iowa State. What's your eval on him?
I have loved this kid ever since I scouted him before we went to the Senior Bowl, and I was pounding the table for him in late January. Like he's a freaking stud, man. I got at watching his tape, and then you see him go to Mobile, and I think being at Senior Bowl, boots on the ground, there's definitely merit there, and he just absolutely crushed it. Like it put him into the guys that got some more positive energy and buzz coming out of, and he's crushed every part of the process. Heath, like, it's Senior Bowl, nobody could guard him. He played on the outside, played on the inside, got pressed, got deep. Nobody could touch him. He just kept getting open at will. And then he goes to the combine and he crushed and he did almost everything. Everything. He jumps at the gym. He runs a 4.39, and it's like, I mean, people talk about the size. Oh, he's 5'10". Does that really matter, Heath, when he's jumping to 41 inches and he's got the vert that's going to put him in the rarefied air of maybe a 6-foot receiver with only a decent vert? Like, that's the catch radius that we're talking about for Jaylen Noel. So I don't care about the size. I think he is a player that, yes, he was locked into the slot a lot at Iowa State, 72% slot usage, but I truly think this is a guy that can play 50-50 inside, outside. If you wanted to put him to the boundary, that I think he can win out there. And I think that's the big differentiator between him and some of these other slot guys. Like, Jaylen Noel has the proof of concept that he can win on the outside. He's an impressive route runner, and he plays bigger than his size. It's not just the testing stuff. I love it when we see these guys that the testing, you see it show up consistently on their film. Like with the body control, this dude's skying into crowded or muddied catch points and coming down with the ball with 2 guys in his face. And I've seen some evaluations, and I'm not, again, trying to toss shade in anything, but one of the things that I've seen discussed about Jaylen Noel, and I think it's just a bad narrative because he was a slot wide receiver, is that, and I think some of this, he debunked it a little bit with the testing and the speed at the combine, but the fact that some people talk about it that he can't get deep. And I'm like, What were you looking at? Like, this guy went out last year and he was 23rd in the nation in deep targets. And that's not the big eye-popping thing that I want to bring up here, but he was second in all FBS wide receivers in deep receiving yards. His ADOT jumped from 7.7 to 12.2. So there is justified verticality in his game that we can latch on to. And I just think this is, if you want to latch onto the guy that jumps out of this class, that we're looking back in hindsight in 2 to 3 years from now, and we're like, why didn't we put more respect on this guy? He is a high-end 2, low-end, maybe wide receiver 1 in an NFL offense. I just absolutely emphatically love Jaylen Noel.
That's awesome stuff. And so you're the perfect guy to make this next case, because when I look at that, like 5'10", 5'11", blazing speed, 190, 195 pounds. It's like, man, that sounds a lot like Matthew Golden. But again, there's a pretty good gap in the consensus rankings between these 2 wide receivers. And in Noel's favor, he was much more productive than Golden was. Is there anything that separates these 2?
I mean, again, going back to my rankings, I have Jaylen Noel at wide receiver 4, and I have Matthew Golden at wide receiver 6.
Okay.
So this is not me hating on Matthew Golden, but the differentiator in And there's two guys in this class. Matthew Golden's one of them, and Luther Burden is the other one. And I know y'all have already discussed him on previous episodes, but
Right.
I think Jaylen Noel is categorically better than both of those players. And Golden specifically, Jaylen Noel proved that he's a better after the catch player, both physicality, and I think we can say it's a wash with route running. Both of these guys are extremely good at route running, and people will say Golden played on the outside. Noel can do that. We've already discussed that, but I think it's the play strength at the catch point that I think is the big differentiator for the two of them. Whereas Golden has a 40% contested catch rate in 2 of the last 3 seasons, and you have Noel that is proven over 50% contested catch rate, and it's all over his film that he's a my ball winner. I don't care about the size. When that dude goes up for above the rim kind of targets, he's coming down with it.
So, I think it's interesting because everybody's kind of already talking about Golden as because he ran so fast. And there was even a little bit beforehand that he was going to sneak into round 1. What type of draft capital right now are you expecting for Noel?
Second round, somewhere in the second round. I think, honestly, I'm not going to be surprised if a team loves him just as much as I do. And we see him go at the top of the second round. That won't shock me at all.
Excellent stuff. Let's move on to wide receiver 9. It is Elic Ayomanor out of Sanford. What's your eval on him?
I mean, again, another guy that, and everybody, the first thing that people talk about with Elic is what he did to Travis Hunter and destroyed him when he faced him in coverage.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to belabor that too much. I mean, really with Elic, you see a guy that can play X. He was really asked over the last 2 seasons to stretch the field. I mean, for a player that we're looking at top 60 amongst FBS wide receivers in ADOT 14.1, 14.2, quarterback play wasn't great over the last 2 years. So I think that gives some context, but very detailed route runner. He can win at the catch point and adds a lot of nuance to his routes. And I think I'm not going to say he's a really exactly clean projection, but you know what you're getting with him. A guy that can be physical, a guy that can win on the outside, can play X, can get deep. There's some drawbacks to his game. Like, I think he's got some footwork issues to clean up. He definitely telegraphs his routes at the top of his stem at times. We could talk about the drop rate, which was 8.7% over the last 2 seasons. So as a player that I like him, I don't love him as maybe some other people in the space and where they're ranking him. I currently have him at wide receiver 8, Heath.
So I think it's interesting because you hit on it there. I've seen a wide range of opinions on this guy. We've got people who think he's a top 6 wide receiver maybe, and we got people who aren't sure that he's a top 18 wide receiver. Is there anything specifically about his game or his stats that make him so polarizing?
I think it comes back to how we open this show and discussing people's process. I think you're going to see film grinders and people that where film is the onus of how they're evaluating prospects. They are probably going to be higher on Elic than the analytics community. Like, people running models are probably going to be lower on him because if you just look at the per route efficiency over the last years, like, Heath, are you getting super excited for a player that amongst all FBS wide receivers, at least 50 targets, was 137th and 78th in yards per route run over the last 2 years? No. But if you turn on the film, he's a better player, and we also have to give context to numbers with quarterback play and maybe some yards left on the field. So I think that's the biggest thing, and also kind of how much do what people weigh drops as far as when they're looking at wide receiver prospects. So a player that I think I'm kind of in line with consensus. Like, where's he at in the consensus again?
He's 9. So you're
okay.
You're
So I mean, yeah,
right
I'm hand holding basically with consensus then.
So he is the youngest wide receiver we're going to talk about today. He's still just 21 years old. Does that earn him a bonus in your eyes? And how do you evaluate 21-year-olds versus 23 or 24-year-olds?
It doesn't. Now, I will say my process has kind of evolved. I think we all used to be like heavy into breakout ages and dominant ratings and blah, 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 blah. I think 2 things have changed the flavor of that Kool-Aid for me over the last few years. One, we are still dealing with the tailwinds of the pandemic and guys staying in college because of that, transfers. The other part of this is NIL is changing the flavor of the coffee here. Like, guys staying in in college longer and coming out as older prospects. Now, can we still point to, the common sense, which it does bear out in the analytics of if you're good when you're younger, then obviously then you're more talented, you earn more volume, things like that. It's just common sense. So I'm not going to weigh him that much more heavily because he is 21 versus some guys that are 23, 24. Part of this is just the changing landscape of college football,
right.
But also too, Heath, like we always discuss in Dynasty too, wide receivers have an incredibly long shelf life. If
right.
you're good, then we're saying, okay, you're probably good for 6 to 8 years. So do I really care if you're 21 versus being 23? If you're good for 6 to 8 years, if you're good, you're good. And if you're not, you're not. That's really what it comes down to me.
Yeah, I don't care so much about 21 versus 23.
Yeah.
It bothers me more if the 23-year-old wasn't really good until he turned 22 or 23. If somebody's good as a 20-year-old, that is a big difference in terms of being a year or two older than most of the guys you were playing against. Let's take our second break. Then we will get to wide receiver 10 through 12 in the consensus rookie rankings.
The crowd loves champions. Gladiator 2 is an epic spectacle.
To amuse you is my only wish.
The glory is yours, not mine.
Very good.
Gladiator 2, rated R, now streaming on Paramount+.
At wide receiver 10, we've got another smaller school guy. It's Jaylen Royals of Utah State. Derek, what do you think about this guy?
I love Jaylen Royals. He's another guy that was a love lister for me as soon as I started breaking down his tape for the Senior Bowl. And just fascinating story, collegiate path and stuff as a guy that came out as a no-star prospect, went to Georgia Military Academy, transfers to Utah State. He's ripping it up in his final season in college. My wide receiver 11 in my ranks currently. That's if you're including Travis Hunter. If we're not including Travis Hunter, he is my wide receiver 10. So again, the guy that I'm hand-holding with consensus. So final collegiate season, I mean, this guy was just putting up video game numbers across his final 4 collegiate games. He was averaging 166.5 receiving yards per game. And everybody's big question about Jaylen Royals, which I understand it, is the player that in his final year that ranked 30th in yards per route run against all FCS and FBS guys with 50 targets. Is he that good? Was it just the lower level of competition that allowed him to excel? I think he is really that good. And part of what was proof of concept for that, for me, was, again, going to Mobile and seeing him against better competition consistently that week. And another point of context for people that in that final season in college, his season was cut short with a foot injury. And seeing him in Mobile, he was not 100%. Now, I want to be very clear when I mention this. It was not the foot injury that was keeping him or holding him back. It was a soft tissue injury. But with Jaylen Royals, he still went out there and competed. And he not only competed, he won consistently in the one-on-ones. And doing that when he's less than 100%, and you could tell that he wasn't, if you watch the film, just even his highlight cut-ups, and I'm not asking everybody to go dive into like 7 games, all 22, like I'm doing on a weekly basis for players, but if you even go watch the highlights and then you turn on anything from the Senior Bowl, you're like, where's the speed? Where's this blazing speed, this run after the catch ability that really just shines for Jaylen Royals? You didn't see it. But his ability to win, despite being less than 100%, being dinged up, he proved in that forum against better competition that he could win consistently while having less tools in the belt from raw attributes of his speed off the line. He won with the finer points of wide receiver play, and that's releases, that's his route running, and he consistently won on in breakers. He won up the seam at the Senior Bowl. So a player that I think we've already seen proof of concept that he is better than just mossing guys in D2, D3 and FCS level. I think he's the real deal. And he proved that in Mobile for me, and a player that he's one of the guys I'm very curious where he goes in the NFL draft. I've seen him in the second round in some mocks. I think that's a little bit rich considering the context of this draft class. I would be surprised because, again, he hasn't been able to, because of the health. Even when he went out to the combine, I talked to him at the combine, he still wasn't 100%. So he didn't do all the testing. And even Though the fact that he ran a 4.4 at the combine, I'm
Right.
taking that with a grain of salt, because I think fully healthy, maybe he would have run better than that and generated more buzz in the process than his body was allowing him to. So I think he probably goes in round 3 of the NFL draft, Heath, and that's fine. I mean, then we're talking about landing spot and what does it look like as far as target competition around him.
And to that point, he played in the Mountain West. He
Mhm.
played a couple of games. He played a game against a Big Ten school in USC. That sounds strange to say. And he had 6 catches for 47 yards. He played against a Big 12 school in Utah. That sounds strange to say. And he had 4 catches for 44 yards.
Mhm.
Now, he also had 211 yards against Boise State. So there was a pretty big split between his conference production and his non-conference, especially Power 5 production. So there's a reason those questions come in, but it's good to hear that you saw him against that top competition and he looked like he belonged. Are we at this point now at wide receiver 10? And I think you said you had Royals at 11. Are we firmly in day 3 territory and round 3 territory of rookie drafts now?
I think we are. Looking at these guys, like I've got Jalen Royals. Again, I have him in my ranks. I've got him as my 28th overall player on my board right now in my rankings on Fantasy Pros.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think even with draft capital, that's probably where he's going to be. He's probably going to be like because some of these running backs, if they get a really good spot and things like that, like maybe a tight end or two could pop it. So I think you're looking at early round 3 in rookie drafts.
Let's get to wide receiver 11. It's Jack Bech. And if you have just kind of not really read a lot, but you just kind of followed along on social media, you've definitely seen this name because he has a lot of very enthusiastic fans of his game.
Yeah, and for good reason, man. I mean, his story, again, we go back to, just diving through not only these players and their skills and where they've gone, their collegiate story as players, but all the off the field stuff is it's tough for Jack Bech. And I always say, like, you want to talk about a guy that the resolve, the grit, all those types of things we can discuss with wide receivers or just NFL players in general. Jack has all of that. And I think you look at not only the things that he's gone through in his personal life, still going through the process, as well as just his journey as a player. Like he started his collegiate career at LSU, and he was excelling at LSU as a freaking tight end, Heath. And then he drops weight. He transfers to TCU. He turns into being a slot wide receiver. And then he has another metamorphosis in his final year at TCU, and he jumps to the perimeter and he wins there. Like in his final year at TCU, he was 17th in receiving grade, 22nd in missed tackles forced. And I think we're still seeing a player that I'll say what I was able to see from him and what he was able to do in Mobile, the fact that, yeah, he won the awards at Mobile, caught the game-winning touchdown, all that kind of stuff. I mean, it was just the cherry on top of a fantastic week for Jack Bech in Mobile, where he won from the slot. He won on in-breakers, out-breakers. He won on the perimeter as well. A player that you're not going to see blazing speed out of Jack Bech, but I'd say overall with wide receivers in general, the 40 times get grossly. I mean, we can say in fantasy, we're trying not to double count speed. The NFL double counts speed all the freaking time. Right. Guys run fast, and we're saying, okay, we already knew he was fast. And the NFL is saying, mouth watering. We can't draft this guy fast enough. And with Jack Bech, he's not going to check that box. He's not a guy that's going to blaze a 40, like running 4.4, 4.3, whatever. Probably a high 4.5 guy, maybe a low 4.6 guy, but a guy you're talking about that he wins with the finer points of wide receiver play, with his ability with releases, his route running, can play inside, outside. I think he definitely proved that even more in Mobile, where there were a number of balls like Jalen Milroe's probably best pass of the week went to Jack Bech on a perimeter route. I think he ran like a double move or a go route up the sideline and came down with the back shoulder ball. It was contested and just looked awesome doing it. So a player that I don't think we've seen the best football yet to be played. I think it's still in front of him, Heath, for Jack Bech. And just the evolution of his game, I think that we could still see another level to his game just as he gets more and more and more comfortable playing wide receiver, playing from the perimeter, we could see more for him in the NFL. I've got like a round 3 grade on him, but if a team were to take him at the back end of round 2, I honestly wouldn't be that surprised.
So you mentioned it, like he played all over the place in college, and he showed an ability at the Senior Bowl to do that as well. Do you think that he could line up anywhere in the NFL, or do you think he's primarily going to be a slot in the NFL?
I think he can play 50-50. I don't want to see him probably like an 80-90% perimeter guy. Like I think he can operate in that way, and especially with the NFL going to, every single NFL defense is 50% zone. Most of them, almost all of them are 54-55% zone on a weekly basis at least. And you're talking about winning versus off coverage on the outside. Can he do that? Yes. I think the best in terms of fantasy ceiling and him actualizing the highest ceiling possible for his skills at the NFL as far as drawing targets, I think the best role for him is either as a power slot or playing 50-50 and getting slot exposure. So I think he can win from the outside, but it's not a role. I don't want him locked into a perimeter only or a perimeter dominant role.
Right. Like if he plays in 2 wide receiver sets, but when they go to 3, he's the guy that goes inside.
Yes.
Or
he's getting like half of the pie as far as the slot stuff.
I think people will rightly or wrongly look at Bech as kind of this crafty technician. Last
guy off the practice field, Heath, all the narratives.
Yes. If Bill Belichick was still in New England, we'd just all mock him there. But like, I think it's a worthwhile question because you mentioned it. He doesn't have the elite speed.
Yep.
And those technical skills are fantastic to have. And we've got players in this draft that might get drafted ahead of him that are behind him in those areas. Mm-hmm. But there's also a certain baseline of athleticism that no matter how good your skills are, you have to be at least this athletic to win against NFL cornerbacks. Do you think he possesses that type of athleticism?
I do. And he showed that now wisely. And I would say this to every prospect coming out. Like if you know your 40 is not great, or your testing isn't great in certain areas, don't do it. Just don't do it. And if your agent is telling you to do it, you need to look for a new agent. So I think it's very wise that Jack Bech did the things that he did at the combine and the testing. Like he went out, his vert wasn't great. You could watch the film, and I'm not going to tell you that Jack Bech's vert was going to be great, but look at the broad jump. He was 93rd percentile, as well as the 3-cone drill. He was 85th percentile. So I think the parts of his game, he didn't run the 40, which was wise, because I think we've had enough guys come out in previous years. I mean, come on, Heath. I'm old enough to remember that Puka Nacua was slow. He wasn't fast enough. Cooper Kupp wasn't fast enough. All these other guys, we can go down a laundry list of players where the NFL, or at least the consortium before the draft, said these guys are not fast enough, and yet it doesn't matter. So right. I think Jack Bech is definitely athletic enough, and I think he was wise to do the testing that he did and that he ddidn't do.
Awesome stuff on Jack Bech, the wide receiver out of TCU. We are coming to wide receiver 12 in the rookie class, and it's Xavier Restrepo out of Miami. I should have had Adam Azer come on here, or Dave, get excited about their Hurricane. This is a South Florida kid through and through. Went to high school down here. I believe he was born down here. What's your eval on him?
Man, I was so much higher on Restrepo before he went out to the combine and then ran. And I mean,
this is why you tell Jack Bech not to run the 40.
Dude, exactly. Like if you're banged up or you're dinged up, just don't run the 40, man. Like, and this comes down to like, if you're going to run the 40 at a 4.7 or a 4.8, basically Xavier Restrepo is, I mean, he's running the 40 of a slow tight end, but he's a 5'10" slot wide receiver, and he's built like a running back. Like if you were to just take away the names and you put both these guys and just body composition next to each other, I mean, Xavier Restrepo looks like Cody Schrader, except he's playing slot wide receiver. I don't understand why Restrepo ran the 40. I mean, even if look, you got to know your times. You got to know your time speed. And he was like, oh, I was hurt. Well, if you're hurt, then why the heck are you running anyway, man? Like, why? I don't get it. So for Restrepo, I was higher on him. Like I had him in that wide receiver 15 to 18 kind of bucket before the 40s and stuff like that. But really, like now, I mean, I've dropped him all the way to wide receiver. I think the conversation for him starts at like wide receiver 18. I've got him at wide receiver 21 right now. So it's kind of a good thing that Dave and everybody are not on this because I'm not saying great things about Restrepo. But I mean, honestly, Heath, like you look at it, like you look at the 40 time, that's damning. I mean, it's absolutely damning his 40 time. So we're looking at a player, and this all goes back to like players helping or hurting their possible draft capital by the testing they're doing or they're not doing. He didn't help himself as a player that, like, in the best case of scenarios, you're probably hoping Xavier Restrepo goes in round 4 of the NFL draft. After running that 40, being a slot confined player, what are we talking about, Heath? I mean, probably like a round 5 guy now. I mean, do you project him to go higher than that?
No, I think it could fall worse than that.
Yeah, same. I won't be surprised if he goes round 6. And so we're talking about he's a slot player. He's limited athletically. Like, there are good things to point to on his analytical profile. But again, there are also a lot of bad things, both with the athletic testing, his role and the role we project in the NFL, because he is definitively a slot-only player. Like, I don't think that he has, obviously, the juice to stretch the field. He's again, where Jalen Noel, I'm talking about a player that plays bigger than his size. The catch radius is bigger.
Right.
I don't think that's the case for Xavier Restrepo. Like, dude can't run a fast 40. Daddy's jumping out the gym. Doubt that's the case. So, I mean, definitively, it's a very confined role. The draft capital is not going to be there. It's hard for me to really get excited about a player like Xavier Restrepo, where it's like, if you even wanted to look at that archetype of player, Heath, like, can you just make a better case for Tez Johnson, even going further down the board? Maybe somebody like Isaac Tesla, who tested better, and he's a big slot. That's where it's like, I just have a hard time getting excited for Restrepo, despite what he did do from a counting stat and some of the things on his analytical profile in college.
I'll make sure I share this with Azer and Dave, and so that they get to hear all this. I'm sure they'll be excited about it.
Oh dear.
No, in all seriousness, that was fantastic. We got done just a little bit earlier, so I'm going to throw a couple of questions at you that I didn't prepare you for. But earlier this week, we talked about wide receiver 1 through 6 in the class with the Couch Scouts, and I've had a lot of people on to talk about Travis Hunter, and it sounds like it just keeps edging more and more, it seems, towards him being predominantly a wide receiver. Maybe they're actually going to let him do both, but it sure sounds like he's going to be a wide receiver. Is he the number 1 wide receiver in this class for you if he's a full-time wide receiver?
He is not.
Okay.
And people are going to think that I am just a Travis Hunter hater with the way that I'm going to talk about him. But if you stack up his numbers versus Tedero and McMillan, they're not comparable. And I understand a lot of context is needed with that. I understand that Hunter played both ways, playing cornerback and having a split focus is definitely going to lead to the fact of that he has got things to clean up in his game for Travis Hunter. For a player that over the last 2 years ranked 38th and 86th amongst FBS wide receivers, at least 50 targets in yards per route run. Are those the analytical numbers that we would point to and say, this is the clear wide receiver 1? And no, I couldn't. But it's not even just the analytical stuff, Heath. It's also the fact of, you look on his film, and there are a lot of parts of his film where there are things that Travis Hunter has to get better at to be a very productive, and to live up to the hype that he's getting as a wide receiver prospect. And again, I'm not shading the guy. If I knew he was a full-time wide receiver, that was his role and only his role going into the NFL, Travis Hunter would be my wide receiver 2 of this class based off of projection and upside. But I cannot in any way, shape, form, or fashion rank him as the wide receiver 1 of this class when he's not better analytically than Tedero McMillan. He's not better on the film than Tedero McMillan. I talked about Tet earlier and the difference between him and Jayden Higgins being a proven winner versus man press. That's one of the things, even if we're not talking about the footwork for Travis Hunter, where if you go on social media and everybody was kind of clowning him a little bit for the Colorado Pro Day TikTok route stuff, where it's just wasted footwork and inefficiency, where it's like, dude, you don't have to like try to juke out the ghost or the person that, or the air that's there to get open. That stuff is also on his film in games where double moves, he has to be more efficient. Shadur's throw into a spot. Travis Hunter doesn't get there because he's too busy trying to juke a guy out in the middle of a route, where it's like, dude, use one step, use a jab step, be efficient, because you don't have the makeup speed where like he has really good speed, but he doesn't have elite speed. Nobody will tell you that Travis Hunter has 4.3 elite speed. So there are parts as a route technician that he has to clean up, and physical corners can get into his body. They could push him off his routes. And you tell me this, Heath, have you heard any of that discussed just off the cuff? When people bring Travis Hunter up in conversation, I feel like the conversation centers around, he's a perfect prospect. He's amazing. He's otherworldly. And I'm not saying the kid isn't crazy talented, and he couldn't be, when we look back on this class, the wide receiver one of this class. But looking at where he is as a player currently, I can't rank him here. And just for further context, last year amongst 268 qualifying wide receivers, he was 40th in yards per route run against zone coverage. Strong.
Yeah.
You look at what he did versus man coverage, and again, going back to my concerns about him as a route runner, and if a team takes him and puts him in a traditional X role on the perimeter and says, go beat man, beat press, do that, I think he could have some hiccups starting out. He was only 78th in yards per route run against man coverage. So it's not just on the film, but it's also in the analytics of, there are things he has to do and clean up in his game. And I don't think that's ever part of the conversation when people talk about Travis Hunter, but correct me if I'm wrong here, Heath.
No, you know what? I'm just so glad I asked the question. We try to get as many different opinions from as many different people, and we want to kind of touch all sides of things. I thought you did a great job there. Great job on today's show. Tell everybody one more time, like what you have coming up for in the next week for the draft and where they can find it.
Oh man. One, thank you for having me on there. It's been a fantastic time chopping it up with you, and everything can be found at fantasypros.com. Again, all my positional primers are already live. So quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end. My top 100 skill players will be live on the site and written up before the NFL draft. Round one, ding, 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 kicks off. So that's coming, as well as all of those primers will be updated post NFL draft. And please, everybody, check out the Fantasy Pros NFL Draft Show.
Thank you, Derek. Thank you, Thomas, for making everything work. Thank you to everybody who was active in the chat. We will talk to you next Tuesday with the tight end preview.